right. Well, welcome again, everybody. This is the Open Mic, and I'm Rich Ehisen. Welcome, and thanks for joining us again in my ongoing series of conversations with great writers and talented authors from across the spectrum. I'm joined today by a really interesting and eclectic, talented guy coming all the way from Brooklyn via the magic of Zoom to share some insights into his work and into writing noir and YA. Richie Narvaez, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Rich. It's great to be here. It's really sweet of you to ask me to be on the show, and I hope I can say something at least halfway interesting.
I'm sure you will. I'm going to say something interesting, which is if you haven't done it already, please hit the subscribe button. I'm fortunate that I've got a lot of really good writers who have already joined me, others that are lining up every day. So please hit the subscribe if you're interested at all in writing like I am. Hopefully we'll all learn something together. I know we've definitely learned something from Richie, who is also a teacher among his many talents. I understand, sounds like you cook, which I really appreciate because I am a cook as well. My wife would not be insulted if she heard me say she is a danger to herself and others in the kitchen. So I all that. but we'll talk about cooking another time. Let's talk about your book. Let's talk about your books.
Sure.
2020 was a tough year for a lot of folks, but you had two books come out. And I'm going to put them up here briefly. You can see one of them behind you there over your shoulder, right here, which is Holly Hernandez and the Death of Disco, which was your foray into YA. Those of you who don't know what that is, it's young adult. And then your great book of short fiction, Noir Yorican. I hope you'd get that right.
Yeah, Noir Yorican, but Noir Yorican is not bad either. That's fine. That's fine.
See, I'm so bad with names. It'd be terrible. It really is. I never forget a face, never forget an image, but I'm lucky I remember my own name or pronounce it properly. Anyway, let's talk about this one first. I love short fiction. I am a huge short fiction fan, and especially in noir. Thank you. Noir and crime fiction.
Yeah.
And mystery and thriller. I find it. It's one of those things that I never get tired of, and I think it's because you have to say a lot in a short amount of space. And the story arcs tend to be really sharp, right, in crime fiction. So tell me a little bit about Noir Yorican.
Okay. Well, so I just like the process of it is, so it's a collection of stories that most of them have been published before over the last 6 to 10 years. And these are what I wanted to, I had another book of short stories called The Roachkiller and Other Stories, which was my sort of introduction. And we've talked about it before.
It's just excellent, by the way.
Thank you. Thanks, man. I realized that after a while I had been collecting stories that had that sort of noir feeling. And by that, I mean, not just the way some people use it just as a general mystery crime fiction tag, but in the noir sense of roman noir, doom for the characters who doom themselves, whose lives are utterly changed by the end of the story and in a negative way. So I noticed that I had a bunch of them. And then I came up with this weird title that, it's sort of branded for the POC age, like, okay, this may get some attention because it's a bit about branding. But these stories all feature Latinx characters, mostly Puerto Rican, but from a whole swath of genres. You've got crime fiction in there, got horror, spec fiction, got a superhero in there. So I kind of have a dark mentality or dark philosophy, slightly pessimistic about the human condition. So putting this together it felt really close to me. This is the stuff I love writing. So I do hope people enjoy it. And you said you read the whole book already. And you just got it like 2 days ago. So thank you so much.
I had actually read the Kindle version. So,
Okay.
and I didn't even realize I'd had on Kindle because I started reading them going, wait a minute, I've read this before. And I
Ah.
realized, oh, because I got it, I had pre-ordered it
Mm-hmm.
from when you first announced that it was going to be
Ah,
coming
very
out.
kind. Thank you,
But
sir.
but
Thank
I,
you, sir.
I read 2 or 3 of the stories
Okay.
again as soon as I got it, because that's what I do. If I'm not writing something, I'm usually reading something. So it's crazy too. They always talk about writers, how you need to have to be a good writer, you need to be a good reader, or
Yeah.
well, then I ought to be Hemingway, because I usually got 7 books going at a time. I'm not sure how that hasn't happened yet, but if that was
I
the criteria, I would be set for life.
I think you're building up the energy, and once you get going, you'll go like crazy. But
That's
no,
what it is.
yeah, I teach writing, as you mentioned, and I do workshops, and I teach at Fashion Institute of Technology in Manhattan, and I will get students who take creative writing classes, and I'll say, so who's your favorite author? Who are you reading? And they say, I don't like reading. I don't read books, or I just read. I listen to stuff. So well, you have to be reading. You have to be looking at the written text if you want to attempt the written text. Getting back to cooking just for a second is like it's asking somebody to be a baker who has never had a cookie. You can try it. It might be just right, but you won't actually know if it's right if you haven't had one before to go, oh yeah, I made a great cookie. You need that contrast. You need to have that knowledge, in your toolkit. So it is important to read and keep reading and read diversely, like read all these different voices, because that's what some of these people who start writing, they'll throw in so many cliches because for them it's still relatively new. Oh, an arm and a leg, that's fine, I can use that. No, actually that got old about 200 years ago. We don't
Yeah.
want to use that anymore. So that's one of the main reasons it's very important to read very much, but also to see what's out there, see what people are trying to say, and then it might help you when you're trying to write, figure out the best way to say something. Oh, I like that. I want to try something like that. It gives you ideas and inspires you. So yeah, reading is very good. You'll be getting to your great American novel than any day.
It's the editing. That's where it's
Okay.
at right now. It's in
Okay.
editing, as it always is. And
Okay.
but actually, it's worthy of a question here, because
Yeah.
I think that the most challenging thing for a lot of writers, aside once you mentioned one of them, cliches and just writing out all the crap that you have to get rid of, right?
Yeah.
Plot and character are the backbones of all stories, and one or the other tends to generally be the real problem for most beginning writers.
Yeah.
What's been your experience, especially as a teacher and as a writer? Do you find your students have the same challenges that you have, or do they have different challenges? I mean, which of those two gives you the most trouble, and is it the same as what you normally find gives your students the most trouble?
Oh, well, for me, I think I guess it is similar to my students. It's making the plot work and move. I think I can come up, generally, I have a pretty good idea of how to come up with strong characters, interesting characters who have life, who are vivid.
Mm-hmm.
But then you put them in a situation, and it's the thing about writing a short story, even a genre short story, you're putting someone out of their comfort zone and you're creating problems for them. And so as
Mm-hmm.
the writer, since you're the deity, you're the god, it's up to you to figure out how they get out of that. And you have to use your imagination to get them out in an interesting fashion. And that's always a bit of a struggle. It's like, okay, now he's cornered. He's got somebody, 2 guys with guns staring at him. How the hell he's going to get out of this room? And so with my students, what I'm saying, besides all the grammatical stuff, which is a whole other issue, and some use a heavy use of cliches. I do see that a lot. They also tend to create wonderful characters, sometimes of course based on themselves very closely, but how to move them about in a situation is difficult for them. I see the difference is, for me, it's easy for me to hurt and mess my characters' lives up. like to really, oh, I'm going to destroy you, and you may not recover. But with my students, they are often reluctant. I think it's almost like these characters are maybe not pets, but they're like a new thing. They're like a new person they've met, and they're like, well, I don't, they want it to be happier in the end. So a lot of them are very prone towards happy endings for their characters. But I say, well, we need to get the character a little bit more into trouble for you to earn that ending, because if he's just a happy ending, the story isn't very interesting. Okay, they found the woman that they loved. She was right there. That's like 3 scenes. We need more. We need more trouble. So that seems to be a lot of the difficulty for them, is really digging deeper into the plot and making their characters
Right.
suffer.
Well, that's one of the things I love about noir short fiction is that you got to get people into a lot of trouble
Yeah.
really fast.
Yes.
And then they may or may not get out of it. That's the
Yeah.
good thing. When and as I said, Roach Killer was excellent.
Thank you.
This
Thank you,
book
sir.
is excellent. You really have a knack for creating an awful lot in a short amount of space. How long did it take you to? I hate to say perfect at any time, because I know with writers
Yeah.
you're always trying to get better. But how long did it take you where you felt like really comfortable doing that, being able to create that really tight story arc, but still with a lot of arc to it that had a lot of emotion to it?
Oh, wow. Yeah, perfect is a word I would never, I don't want to even come near touching that word. But to feel comfortable, I would, you have sort of have to relearn it every time. But I do know the tricks for doing it. As I'm doing it, I know that, oh, this should happen. Let's look a little bit at this as I'm creating a character. I will say that probably took, look, I took a creative writing master's degree at Stony Brook, and I didn't learn it then. It was a wonderful experience, but it was, a lot of the stuff you learn in creative writing classes, but it didn't sink in. And it really, the lessons of creative writing really sink in when you practice and practice and practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it took really going at writing story after story, which for me kicked off about 2005 when I started really getting published and finding my niche in the publishing world. After a while, I started to say, oh, this works. This process works. So I think maybe somewhere 2012, 2013, like 7 years later. So only about 6 or 7 years ago, I started to know this is how this works. This is how I can do this in a short amount of space. And I really do enjoy writing. I've written 2 novels now, but the short story form is a lot of fun. You can create a character, deal with their arc, and then go on to a new world. There's much more time to explore different other worlds. Whereas with a novel, you're with these people for 2 years, 3 years, which is nice. It's almost like, but after a while, it's like having relatives stay over, and you wanna have some new guests.
Yeah.
So the thing about the short stories is nice. You get the guests in, you get them in deep trouble, and yeah, it's about doing it very quickly. Scene 1 or scene 2, it has to get going. In fact, I do prefer in scene 1, we have to have a sense of the trouble that's coming. There has to be some internal trouble as well, because that's where more conflict is coming from. And then you throw whatever it is from the outside that disturbs their peace or disturbs their status quo. And then those two just move along. But yeah, they almost, if you can cook the character well, so that they're alive enough and that they have an internal conflict, that when you throw this situation at them, a lot of it writes itself. And it's just a matter of using your imagination about how they are going to get out of it, or in terms of noir, not going to get out of it.
To stay a little bit on the cooking analogies here, which I didn't intend to do, but I was listening to a podcast recently, and the person being interviewed is a Nigerian of Nigerian descent, a chef, and what she was talking about was the no longer feeling compelled when she writes a cookbook to explain to people what ingredients are. If she says
Ah,
use this ingredient, I mean, she was very blunt. The onus is on you. If you don't know what that is or where to find it, do a little homework and figure it out. It's
yeah,
not my job to explain where every single ingredient in this, if you want to make a authentic dish, these are the ingredients. And if you don't know what they are, it's not on me to explain that. You need to do a little work here too and figure it out. And I thought about that to some to extent in the context of writing, because I've seen more writers of late, mostly Spanish speakers, who will have uh, parts of their stories, sometimes novels, sometimes short stories, that will be in Spanish, or
mhm,
it could be in Eastern European languages, what have you, without translating that stuff.
yeah,
And I think you and I may have talked about this once before, but I'm seeing it so much more often now. And I, you know, I'm really in support of the whole concept of own voices and, allowing writers to be really authentic. At the same time, are you ever concerned in that you might lose a reader there who's a little lazy and is not willing to either not
yeah,
understand
yeah,
everything without doing the work, or is offended in some way, because right now there's also that.
yeah,
Sorry, that's a really long-winded question, but basically, what's your take now? Because I know you do that.
yeah.
What's your thought on how readers absorb that kind of thing in
Right.
their stories?
Well, we would all like to have um, conscious, high functioning, ambitious readers who be like, oh, who read a sentence and go, whoa, hey, let me just look that up. Um, and the thing is, they're not all going to do it. And some of them will just say, okay, they'll skip over it. And then you can get away with that a few times. And then, of course, you're going to have readers who are like, there's too much Spanish. This isn't written for me. It's too much Spanish. So they'll just abandon the book. Um, I'm English dominant, so I do write mostly in English. But sometimes my characters are not English dominant, and I'll want to throw in Spanish, and I won't translate it sometimes. But I think, for the most part, I've tried to work it out where the sentiment of what's being said is obvious, or even if not, it's okay if you didn't know it. The people who know it, they got that. The people who didn't, it's fine. You didn't miss anything major. Um, I remember in high school, I'm reading. You might like was it T.S. Eliot, Proof
Mhm.
Rock?
Oh
There's
yeah.
like this whole long passage, and a lot of those poets from that era, they're throwing in Latin, they're throwing in Greek, and if there wasn't a footnote, I'd be completely lost. In their time, they assumed that if you knew, you knew, and it was sort of an elitism to it, sort of a slight snobbery, frankly, and also to say, well, you better know Spanish. There's a slight snobbery to that. There's a slight sort of like, well, you should know. The thing is, I don't want to write. I do want to have a large audience as possible. I want everyone to enjoy my books. I do have little phrases and private jokes for other Latinx people, for New Ricans and Puerto Ricans, things that they'll only get, but the story still functions. I hope they do. They still function for everybody. So it's a little bit of a trick, um, or a lot of work sometimes that you have to do to make sure that that is all balanced within there. So I don't go around assuming that everyone is going to translate everything, and I think that's fine. And I don't assume that they have to know the language as well. Um, there's just, I mean, for all of us, the thing is, and you brought this up before, there's a lot of new voices coming out in literature. There's a lot more people being represented. And frankly, there's only so many languages, as somebody who wants to read as much as possible, so many languages you're gonna know. So, if like you're interested in a Nigerian writer, and they throw in some phrases or something from their mythology and their belief system, then you would, if you're really interested, in maybe do the background research for that. And that would be a more conscientious reader. Are most readers like that? Probably not. But I
Well,
think, yeah,
I think it would depend on the genre. I mean,
yeah,
I tend, I
well,
tend to think if you're reading a literary fiction or something, you
mm,
know, uh, uh, meant to be a little bit more, for lack of a better word, highbrow or something along those lines.
yeah,
What we call literary in this day and age, you might do that. When it's noir or, well, even something like Cormac McCarthy, if you've read all the pretty horses and things like that. He uses a lot of Spanish with no translation.
yeah,
I don't know where that falls on the, is
yeah. Is that
that
own
literary
voices? Is
fiction
that,
or yeah,
yeah. Is
but
he just being mannish? I don't know.
yeah, but I like this. I like it actually.
Yeah.
I like to see anything like that in this day and age because it
Mm,
does feel like for a long time so many authors, women who wanted to write mystery or crime, any writer of color, their voices, they weren't completely shut out, but the road there was a lot harder. And so when I see that, I feel a little kinsmanship. It's like, all right, now there's a writer who said, hell with it, and
right.
and I'm going to do this, and it works for them. And see, I like that. I like things that break whatever the norm is, right? It's more
Yeah.
creative in a lot of ways to me.
And yeah, it could actually be quite useful. So let's say you have somebody who maybe is not a Spanish speaker as a character, and you have all these other characters speaking Spanish. If the reader's disoriented, that's mirroring what's happening to that character. Oh, you don't understand this language? Well, too bad. This is what happens in real life. This is just as bad as this, and you should experience that. And it's important to see that and I think it does help when you throw that at people who don't know the language to say, oh my God, there's this whole other group of people going on. They're
Right.
speaking this whole other
Right.
language. Oh my God. And
It's
it makes them
not just
aware.
us.
Yeah, there's not just us. And I think that's a really important part of it. And with adding language like that. And I think it can happen. I see, yeah, genre sometimes has been traditionally not experimenting with that kind of stuff. But I think we're seeing more and more diversity in everything from, crime fiction, horror, sci-fi, where you are seeing more play with that kind of language.
I love it. Well, let's talk about your other book too, YA, which is, we've been talking about a lot of gritty things, noir and crime fiction and that kind of thing. This also has, well, as the title would indicate, it has some death.
Yes. Well,
Has
yeah,
some.
we needed to indicate that it was a murder mystery somehow. That's one of
That
those
death is a
things. Yeah.
good. That's a good clue.
Yeah.
You know, Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to do some YA. What was
Ah,
the experience like? Are you going to do more? What's the reception been like?
well, I will just to go backwards. The reception has been very nice. People have been really sweet about the book. I think it's a YA book, young adult, aimed 13, 14, 15, but 12-year-olds can read it as well. There's nothing too crazy or adultish in there. Um, but I've gotten a lot of good reception from kids, but also from people who lived through the era of the book. It takes place in 1979. So there's a lot of references to culture that goes on there, to the disco era. So a lot of people like that and find it fun, as maybe, in that sort of nostalgic way. I got into it partially because I was seeing a lot of people, Latinx people experimenting with YA. So a lot of attention going to YA, and I'm like, maybe I could give that a shot. And I had written a short story with Holly Hernandez, a sort of a Puerto Rican Nancy Drew, about 10 years ago. And the publisher said, anytime you want to write a book about her, you come to us. So I wrote a book about her, partially because of that invitation, but also I had enjoyed writing about her. And the short story was a contemporary book. It took place in modern day. But I said, look, I'm going to be writing about a 14-year-old. And if I wrote about a modern day 14-year-old, I think it's going to be a little stretch for me. I'm in my 50s. I got to do a lot of research. Why don't I remember when I was 14? So I took the book back to 1979 when I was 14, and it opened up all these possibilities in terms of plot. 1979 was a major year in history. There was a lot going on. This is when Reagan wins. This is when the disco was supposed to have died. A lot of stuff in pop culture is happening. A lot of stuff in politics. So I thought it was a really nice age of conflict to place this story in, and just to refer to a lot of it within it. So there was a lot of possibilities there that, you think a YA book is just pretty flimsy and fun, but there's a lot of, I hope, depth going on underneath it that made it fun to write. So yeah, I think I'll probably experiment with it again, definitely.
Did you struggle at all? I think about this.
Yeah.
I really admire historical fiction writers because you really have to get so many things right, because there's always somebody that'll point out that you got some little thing wrong or what have you.
Yes.
When you think about, okay, you're going to write a character from 40 years ago, or in a time frame from 40 years ago, did you have to go back and say, okay, now I got to go back and research the disco era and all that kind of thing? Yeah, I lived
Yeah.
it, but okay, da 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 da. How much time did you put into all that before you could even write the story?
Oh my
of
God.
some character?
More than I thought I would. One of the reasons I've actually thought I was being very clever and lazy by saying, well, I'll just write about my time when I was 14 years old. This is going to be easy. I don't have to research cell phone usage or modern slang. But then I had to remember, well, I was doing research like, well, were people saying that in 1979, or is that an 80s thing? What were we wearing in 1979? Did we say backpack? Did we say knapsack? What did we say back then? And then the music, like there was some music that is pop music, but there's some music that was around, but like not everyone was listening to, that we know today, but maybe it was more obscure then. So I had to do all these a lot of trips, the Googling, to figure out things and get some basis. And I had to ask friends. I had to ask my older brother and sister to put things in context for me. I had a friend who works for because I was 14. There's only so much awareness you are when you're 14. They were already like in their late teens. They're like, oh, they would tell me, no, we didn't do that. And then in terms of the police stuff, and I had to ask a friend of mine who's a historian of the New York Police Department, tell me what was happening and what would happen, for example, with a teenager who was arrested for something. And apparently in 1979, the police department had decided on a really tough policy on teenagers. So immediately they would go to jail at like a place like Spofford, which is what happens to Xander Herrera, the Holly Hernandez's rival, and the one who eventually helps her solve the mystery. So the thing is, like, it's a really awful experience for him because Spofford was famously a bad place for teenagers. So I only got there through research. I had known something about it through reputation, but I had to research it, looked on the plans for it, so how it looked at, looked up some documentaries about it. So yeah, it was a lot more than I thought. I really thought this is going to be a breeze, but it turned out to be quite a bit. It just, as you say, to make it come out right, and so that all your Amazon reviews aren't like, well, that didn't happen. Right. That's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, people, at least when the ones that go to give reviews, sometimes I want to ask them, you were aware this was fiction, right?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why you get hung up on this little stuff, but they do, right?
They do. Yeah. No, there's some people that I think they want to say something, and then they nitpick. I think it's a power thing, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to ask you about that because one of the other aspects of writing anything, but particularly with short fiction, or in a really crowded field now like YA,
yeah,
you get a lot of rejection.
Oh yes.
And any writer has to learn to deal with it.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
Well, there's a brand of bourbon that I really enjoy, and that seems to do the trick. There was a
when all else fails, bourbon.
Bourbon is a great band-aid. Actually, so with my short stories, I have learned to be pretty good at taking rejection. I've been writing short stories since I got out of school and sending them out. So I think I just developed the callus for it. It's like, okay, got rejected. I'll let the story sit, take a look at it again, and send it out again as soon as possible. But I always double check to make sure, did I screw up somewhere? Did I not proofread something like that? And take a look at it again, see how it could be better. So with short stories, it's basically calluses. With the novels, it's been a little tougher because, again, they live with you a bit longer. So it's like sending your baby to kindergarten, your child to school for the first time, and then the teacher says, no, go back home because you suck. So it hurts. It hurts. And it's just a matter of, I guess, the more I do it, I think it'll be fine. I mean, I don't take it personally. I understand that what we do, what publishing is very much a business, and it's about branding. One publishing company has a brand. This is what we want. Yes, from the outside, it feels unfair, and frankly, it is unfair. It's about people. It's a lot of it. It's about people who know people. It's a lot about like, well, that was successful. We want the same thing. And that can hurt when you're an artist and you're trying to be creative. But that you have to understand that while we think of this, or think of ourselves as artists, this is a business for the people who get the books published. So you always have to keep that in mind, that it's that, yeah, maybe sometimes you suck, maybe your work sucks and needs some tuning. Try to think about that. But also sometimes it's just, they did it already. They want something a little different. They want it from a different perspective that is not yours. And you just have to move forward. You know?
Timing is everything.
Yeah, a lot of it's about timing. I'm sure I would be tremendously successful in 1992.
Well, I like to end on what I hope's a fun question. I mean, for it to be a fun question. And I hope I haven't given you one of these before, but I always like to give my three-person option here. Let's just say I have the power to put you together with any one of the following three people. Who would you want to sit down with for a conversation? Maybe a nice cold glass of bourbon.
Yes.
Your options, Mr. Narvaez, that I will give you.
Yes.
The great Roberto Clemente. My very first baseball hero. Former First Lady Laura Bush. Or the late Hugh Hefner.
Well, frankly, sorry, not Laura Bush. I would not. Sure, she's very nice, but Hugh Hefner. If you'd asked me maybe 20 years ago, I would have been, I'd like to ask him some questions. But I think at this point, I might be a little skeeved out by him.
Yeah.
So no offense to the Hefner estate. But I would definitely say Roberto Clemente. He died when I was young. I remember that being covered in the news. I've seen documentaries about him. I still don't feel that I know him. He just has been portrayed as such almost a saint-like character.
Mm-hmm.
Really a saint. There's always, a humanity there. And I would love to ask him some basic questions and to hang out with him. Because I think there's probably a lot that he could teach me.
Yeah.
So I'd love to have a couple of drinks, probably a couple of cervezas, maybe some Schlitz or Schaefer. He would like Schaefer. Schaefer. We'd have a nice couple of cold beers.
I agree. Yeah, he was my very first baseball hero. I was just a young kid when I learned about him, and then my mom didn't care a flying flip about sports of any kind, but I had an aunt who was a rabid baseball fan, big Giants fan. Every now and then when I would stay with them, a baseball game would be on TV. And of course, the Pirates were very good at that time. So we would see playoffs and things like that. And she loved Roberto Clemente too. And so I learned to love Roberto. And then what was I? I was 9 years old when he died. So it was shocking, and same thing. You hear when someone passes so tragically and so young, all you ever hear is what a fabulous, saint-like person they were. But, we're all real. And,
right. Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about him. So anyway, Richie, thank you again.
Thank you.
Always loved having you
great.
as a guest on the blog, and now here. Wish you great success with the books. For anyone who has been sparked to interest by this conversation, which I hope you have. Amazon, RichieNarvaez.com, any normal place you buy books, you'll find them.
Yes.
Roach Killer, Holly Hernandez, if you have a YA age child, if you want to read some great noir short story fiction here, and if you'd like to read a novel that he did that's fabulous, went completely brain dead here.
Hipster Death Rattle.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
It's see the book in front of me. Had a senior moment because I'm damn near 60 and it's just scaring me to death. But anyway, hopefully you're all not going to have a senior moment. You will remember to go order one of his books, and you will also remember to hit the subscribe button so you can keep seeing some of the great authors who are gracious enough to come share their time and insight with all of us. And until then, next time, see you on the open mic. Richie, thanks again.
Rich.
Have a great evening. Stay with me just 1 second, I'll take us out.